My name's Lynn. I recently got married to my husband, Scott, and now I have a sister-in-law named Abigail. I just got a strange phone call from her. Lynn, are you listening? I am, but I didn't really understand what you said. Okay, I'll say it again. Your cruiser. I crashed it into an iceberg. That didn't make much sense to me. First of all, I don't even own a cruiser. And icebergs? You'd only find those near the Arctic or Antarctic, not here in Los Angeles. But Abigail's a bit quirky. She's either mixed up or trying to joke around with me. So I asked her again, did you really crash into an iceberg? Yeah, I aimed right at it and sank it, she laughed. Her tone annoyed me, so I asked her to explain more seriously. She just laughed and said, "Oh, Lynn, you're so silly. Fine, I'll explain." Her story started when I first visited Scott's family home for a family gathering. Abigail was there too, and as soon as she saw me, she said, "Wow, you look kind of Japanese." I explained to her that my grandmother is Japanese, my grandfather is American, and my mom married my American dad. My family later moved to Alabama for my dad's work. I have an East Asian look, and sometimes people would tease me about it, so I was a bit nervous about how she'd react. But Abigail just said, "Really? That's so cool. You're really cute." That made me feel relieved. I've been a bit worried about being accepted. "Thanks. I look forward to getting along," I said. Later, Scott's mom, Victoria, joined us and asked, "Lynn, you lived in Los Angeles, right? Do you still have a house there?" I told her that while my old house is rented out now, we still have relatives with homes there. She seemed strangely happy about that. Then Abigail said, "Yeah, that's what I thought too." That made me a bit uneasy, but I brushed it off since it's rare to be with Scott's family, so I didn't think too much about it. But then Victoria and Abigail kept asking strange questions, like about the kind of house I had in LA and the car I drove. They even asked about my relatives' homes in Los Angeles. I told them that my old house had a pool and my uncle's house was near a river. When they heard that, Victoria and her group laughed in a way that felt a bit mean. That's when I realized what was going on. Victoria and Abigail were planning to use my family's place as an excuse to take a trip to the West Coast. I worried they might be taking advantage of me, but since I just met them, I didn't want to complain and risk creating tension. After thinking about it, I decided to put up with it for now. Since a trip wasn't happening anytime soon, I figured we could discuss it properly later. After we got through introductions, Abigail asked for my contact info, and I shared it, though I quickly regretted it. She began contacting me more often. At first, it was once a week, and I went along with it or politely declined. But soon she was calling more frequently, and it became a hassle. I started making excuses, like saying I was at work or busy. Once Scott and I officially filed our marriage paperwork, Abigail became even more demanding. I tried to keep up at first, but 2 or 3 times a week was too much. Then, late one evening, she called again, wanting to hang out. "It's already 8 p.m., Abigail. I have work tomorrow," I said. "What? Can't you make it work?" "No, I can't. Abigail has more free time since she works part-time, but I have a full-time job and other responsibilities. I just don't have that kind of free time." "Stingy, even though you're rich," she muttered and hung up. I was confused. "I'm not rich. I work full-time, but my salary isn't high." The next day, I got another call, this time from Victoria. "Lynn, want to go shopping together?" she asked. I'm pretty busy with work," I replied. Then Victoria said something that surprised me. "But you're rich, right, Lynn? I thought you could help me choose some expensive brands." "Sorry, did you just say rich?" I asked, thinking I must have misheard. "Yes. You lived in Los Angeles, didn't you? Does living in Los Angeles make someone rich?" That seemed like a strange assumption. I explained, "I'm not rich." "What? But you had a house with a pool," she insisted. "That's actually pretty common in California," I told her. "Oh, I see. I must have misunderstood," Victoria said and hung up quickly. I was left puzzled. Later, I discussed it with Scott, who decided to speak with his mom and sister. It turns out they'd assumed I was wealthy simply because I lived in Los Angeles and had a house with a pool, thinking I lived in Beverly Hills. In their minds, Beverly Hills equals wealth. So they mistakenly thought I had a lot of money and were hoping to benefit from it by staying close to me. I realized this misunderstanding was why they kept calling and asking for things, hoping to gain something from their connection to me. Eventually, Scott helped clear up the misunderstanding, though Victoria and her friends seemed disappointed. They'd hoped that if I were wealthy, we could have gone on fun trips or had big parties all the time. I could understand their letdown, but I was relieved everything was finally out in the open. Later, when I went over to discuss the wedding plans with Victoria's family, the tone had changed. If they'd still thought I was rich, they might have pushed for a lavish wedding. But Victoria actually asked, "What kind of wedding are you planning? You're not thinking of something extravagant, are you?" I reassured her that a small family-only ceremony was fine, and she seemed relieved. However, Abigail still seemed to have her doubts. She stayed quiet during the wedding planning, which was disappointing. But despite her lack of involvement, the wedding moved forward. A year later, on our wedding day, we had a beautiful ceremony. My parents, who live in Birmingham, arrived just in time, but my grandparents in Los Angeles couldn't make the long trip. Instead, my Uncle Taylor, my mom's brother, came to represent them. He promised to take pictures to share with them later. A few hours before the ceremony, Uncle Taylor came to see me in the dressing room. "Lynn, how are you feeling?" he asked, smiling. Taylor owns a company that rents out cruisers and pleasure boats, and he proudly showed me a picture of a new boat he just bought. It looked impressive and very expensive. "How much was it?" I asked, a bit shocked. He typed a number on his phone, $3 million. I was stunned. But then, Taylor showed me another picture and said, "Lynn, this one's a wedding gift for you." It was a picture of a smaller pleasure boat. His company had recently replaced some of their boats, so he kept one for me at his riverside home, which I could use whenever I visited. I was deeply touched and thanked him warmly. Just then, Abigail entered the dressing room with a curious smile on her face. It seemed she overheard our conversation. Trying to act casual, I explained, "Taylor gave me a boat, but it's just an old one from his company." "A boat? Who just gives someone a boat?" she asked, sounding intrigued. I quickly explained it was secondhand, hoping she wouldn't press the matter. After Taylor left, I saw Abigail sneaking a peek at the photo he'd shown me. Though she pretended not to care, I had a feeling she was more interested than she let on. After the wedding, while we were driving back, Victoria turned to me and asked, "Lynn, did you let Grandma know about the wedding?" "Of course, I even sent her photos," I replied. "That's great, but don't you think it would be nice to visit her in person?" she continued, clearly hinting at something. She then added, "I'd love to meet your grandparents too. Why don't we make it a family trip to the West Coast?" It seemed Victoria hadn't given up on her West Coast trip idea. I was thinking of how to turn down the offer when she mentioned, "Actually, I talked to Taylor, and he said he'd love for us to visit." Did Taylor actually hear that with all the noise around? I wondered, but I didn't press further, thinking he probably didn't. Not wanting to trouble Taylor, I declined. Victoria suddenly frowned and said, "Oh, poor Grandpa and Grandma missed the wedding and didn't get to see their grandchild." "Please don't say it like that," I replied, feeling a bit guilty. "Don't you want to see them?" she asked. "I do, but..." I hesitated. "Then let's go," she insisted. In the end, I couldn't refuse. Victoria's enthusiasm pushed me into agreeing, and we decided to make a trip to the West Coast for our honeymoon. Truthfully, I was happy to go, excited to see Grandpa and Grandma after so long. We could also enjoy the river near Taylor's house and the pleasure boat. With that in mind, I decided to make the most of it. A few months after the wedding, during our summer vacation, we traveled to the West Coast. When I told Taylor about our plans, he happily invited us to stay. So Scott, Victoria, Abigail, and I headed to Los Angeles. My father-in-law couldn't come because of work, but I was thrilled for our first family trip as newlyweds. I saw this as a great opportunity to bond more with Victoria and Abigail. On the day we arrived, we had a warm reunion with Grandpa and Grandma. I introduced Scott to them and to Victoria and Abigail, and we enjoyed a family party. Abigail, with her usual cheer, quickly bonded with Taylor's family, and Victoria seemed to be enjoying herself too. It really felt like we were becoming a close-knit family. The next day, my brother Kevin, who lives alone in San Francisco, came to visit us. "Hey, Kevin, how's school going?" I asked. "It's the weekend, so I thought I'd come say hello," he replied. I was excited to introduce him to Scott and everyone else, but I couldn't find Victoria or Abigail anywhere. I asked Scott, who was helping my aunt, Have you seen Victoria and the others? He shrugged. No idea. Just then, I got a call from Abigail. Hello, Lynn, he greeted me cheerfully. Abigail, where are you? My brother just arrived, I began, but she interrupted with laughter. Oh, Lynn, you're so relaxed. What's going on? I asked, feeling uneasy. Do you know where we are? She teased. I was just looking for you. Where are you? That's a secret, she said with a mischievous tone. Just wanted to tell you something. What is it? I asked, curious. Your cruiser. I crashed it into an iceberg and sank it, she said, bursting into laughter. I was stunned as I tried to process what she just told me. Abigail had overheard Taylor's gift of the pleasure boat on my wedding day, and now it seemed she'd taken it for a joyride and wrecked it. Abigail had seen a photo of a cruiser and overheard me talking about getting a boat, so she may have gotten mixed up. I tried to clarify, saying, if I had a boat, it'd be at my house. The boat I got as a gift is a pleasure boat at Taylor's place. But Abigail insisted, no, your cruiser sank right in front of me. I was confused. I don't even own a cruiser. The boat I received was just a small pleasure boat. Abigail seemed puzzled. What's a pleasure boat? I explained. A pleasure boat is for short trips and fun, but a cruiser is for staying overnight. The cruiser that sank isn't mine. Then whose is it? She asked, looking uncertain. Based on her mention of a photo, I guessed it might actually be Taylor's cruiser. Just then, I heard Taylor shouting over the phone. What have you done? It hit me. Abigail must have thought Taylor's cruiser was mine and somehow sank his $3 million boat. I quickly told her, Abigail, don't move. Why? What's wrong? This is Los Angeles, not some rural area like Alabama. You can't just sink a boat and walk away. Oh no, she whimpered, sounding panicked. I could hear Abigail crying and pleading with her mom, Victoria, who responded, You did it on your own, Abigail. While they argued, I called Scott, then rushed to the marina where Taylor's cruiser had been docked. When I arrived, police officers were already there, and Taylor looked shocked. He explained that Abigail and Victoria had asked him to take them on a cruiser ride. With their strong accents, he thought they said something about a Lisa cruiser, which he took to mean a long-term rental. Meanwhile, Abigail explained her side. I kept telling Taylor to let me on Lynn's cruiser, but he didn't seem to understand. Taylor added, all I could make out was Lisa cruiser. With her accent, I figured she just wanted to borrow a boat. As it turned out, Taylor, trying to be nice, let her use his cruiser. Abigail had thought it was mine, wanting to get back at me because she thought I was hiding wealth. But sinking the cruiser seemed extreme. I still had one more question. How did you even operate the cruiser? Don't you need a license? She replied, I just watched Taylor and guessed. It was a complete misunderstanding fueled by accents and assumptions, but now we had a very expensive mistake on our hands. Abigail explained that she had just been messing around, and somehow, the cruiser started moving. She couldn't stop it, so it crashed into the dock and began sinking. In a panic, she thought, well, might as well let it sink. Her original plan was just to cause a little trouble, but things got out of control. Instead of calling the police, she panicked and came to me. She thought she could make it sound like a dramatic accident to scare me. Remembering a movie where a ship sank after hitting an iceberg, she figured she used that story, assuming that since it was a Hollywood film and we were in Los Angeles, there must be icebergs nearby. With that strange logic, she lied about hitting an iceberg, hoping I'd be worried and rush over. I saw why she made up the iceberg story, but her reasoning was ridiculous. Scott gave both Abigail and Victoria a stern talking to, and luckily, no other boats were damaged. Taylor only had to pay for repairs, which settled the issue. In the end, Abigail had to work for a river cleaning company back in Birmingham to pay off the repair costs. She whined, but I wanted to be on a cruiser, not just any boat. Still, she was stuck picking up trash from a boat, which was at least a little like her dream. On the plus side, Victoria started working, too, to help Abigail with the costs, so she stopped contacting me as much. I do want to get along with them, but they need to work and earn money, especially after sinking a $3 million cruiser that I haven't even had the chance to enjoy myself.